That was terrific. So we've had three very excellent introductions. I'll start, you know what, I won't even ask a question just yet. Does anybody like to ask a question of these five panelists? There is a microphone somewhere. Where do we have one? We have a gentleman. I'm not going to say the gentleman in the check shirt, but the gentleman in the check shirt. Would you, first of all, sort of introduce yourself as well and your company too?
My name is Tony Gardiner. I'm from LC Packaging. We supply material into a lot of produce and agriculture that goes into supermarkets. My question's to Jane. You just spoke about the letters of complaint or otherwise that you're receiving. I just wonder when you're going to start a program of on-pack education, because the one thing that's missing, and the one word that hasn't been said this afternoon, is education, and it's urgently needed for consumers.
I mean, I think that's one everybody can answer, rather.
On-pack might be a slight challenge. They're very, very small, some of these packs, with an awful lot of legal information. We have done things like that in the past, but actually in terms of educating the consumer, it's very much on our mind. And actually it's part of the UK Plastic Pact, which is why we signed up to it, because it's the most sensible approach for the whole of the industry to collaborate and do this. But we will be doing campaigns to talk to customers about how they can recycle more, how to understand exactly what they can and can't recycle. We trialled quite some years ago, along with Tesco, where we put on things like bread bags and frozen bags that you can recycle those types of bags with our carrier bags at the front of store. So we have been doing that for some years. But I would love that we had the space and to be able to put all of that information on pack, but unfortunately we know people don't necessarily read packaging. But we have got an opportunity to do it online, in store, and actually our colleagues are brilliant to be able to talk to customers, and we are giving them the right information and the power to be able to talk to customers when they have these questions about packaging and plastic.
In store, would you be prepared to do it on the shelf?
I can't really share that, but I'm talking to people internally about what we can and can't do in terms of in-store, because obviously shelves come at a premium.
They're precious,
yeah, exactly, yeah.
Okay, please pass the microphone along to Paul. Have you got one? Oh, there you go. Right, thank you.
I don't really deal with produce, but you know, in terms of materials, and I totally support. I do really believe that education is a real focus that we need to make for people, not only on the pack, but also within our schools, because I think that for the future we need to make the children more responsible for the types of packaging and how they dispose of their Coca-Cola bottles or whatever it happens to be, and know that they can recycle that, and it is infinitely recyclable. An aluminium can, a tin plate, aluminium bag on valve packaging, that type of thing. Educate them on the types of packaging that are actually recyclable, and actually let's try and sort of make them aware, so when they do see a pack, they say, yeah, this is recyclable. They don't have to read the very tiny writing on the bottom of the pack to say it is recyclable. Let's teach them about packaging. Let's even, as an industry, get onto some TV channels and have some education on TV channels where we go through each of the different packaging materials, why we need them, why we need to recycle them, and how we can recycle them. Because that, I believe, is the future. And if we can get the next generation doing things in the right way, then I believe that will be the way that we will set up. We'll get into the Denmark scenario rather than the UK scenario.
Thank you. And Julian?
And I think I mentioned earlier, one of the pillars of our strategy is to try and leverage the power of our brands to engage our consumers. You know, people are genuinely confused, and I work in a business that has very simple pack formats, all of them by and large eminently recyclable, and yet people are still confused. Can I recycle a plastic bottle or not? So we start with a pack. We've got the OPRL label on all of our packs. We try and feature that. I think Jane is here from the OPRL. It'd be great if all businesses could actually start to use the same common factual information about what can and what can't be recycled. That will help in the process, I think, that's being described. We're experimenting now, so you'll see on some of our brands, on the caps, We've got a message about recycling. We're putting messages on multi-packs. So we're trying to use all of the brand architecture that we have available to engage consumers. And then online through social channels, we're working with vloggers and bloggers. I have no idea what these people are or what they do, but apparently
They
very
vlog. They
influential.
vlog.
We've taken them into our factories. We've let them film videos. We've taken them up to the supplier we work with who provides a lot of our recycled content, and they can bring that story to life in a way that, frankly, a corporate can't. So we're working through a lot of those channels, and then also using more traditional marketing communications to try and just engage our consumers in some of this stuff and give them a reason to understand why, if they do some of the basic things, we've got a better chance of recovering more packaging and getting more back, albeit within the constraints of the current recovery systems, which I think we've all agreed are not working particularly well at the moment.
I will ask you to all three of you, thinking about what Lord Deben said, how much easier would it be for you to be able to communicate if there were just two categories? Yes, tick, recyclable, cross, not recyclable. And do you yearn for that?
I'll go first, and then I'll maybe hand it straight to Jane, who's got a probably more complex portfolio to manage. Yes, I think that would obviously help. I think it would help if we had a common recovery and collection system in the 400 plus local authorities in the country. I'm not actually pointing a finger of blame at local authorities on this.
Absolutely
it was a
not.
system that was created. The politics were localism. The PRN system was the PRN system. We've got really the service that, frankly, we deserve, which is why it's so important we're now having the debates about how can we improve and change that for the better. But I'm sure a retailer's probably got a slightly more complicated answer to that question.
You better tell us how many lines you have, first of all.
Do you want me to tell? About 12,500 Sainsbury's, but with Argos as well, it's more like 90,000. So it is complex. It would be so much better if we could say, yes, it's recyclable, no, it's not. It is, in terms of those 9,000 complaints that we get, amongst one of those complaints is the Czech local, that they are confused. They don't understand it, so it would be much easier. And also what Lord Deben said about making it simple. You have to make things really simple for people, because actually they don't really interact with packaging until it's going in the bin. They haven't thought about what it's done, because actually it's done a really good job. It's done its intuitive job of getting product onto the shelf and into their home. But they only think about it when they've got to get rid of it, and that's when they get frustrated, and that's when they write in.
And Paul, if you have a view on that.
Just wanted to add to that. As Church and Dwight is a global brand, and we're growing our brands within non-mature markets. So growing economies, we're actually shipping our brands over there. One of the things I think we're responsible for is ensuring that packaging is handled and managed in the right way in those growing economies, because from what I understand, most of the rivers and the plastic flowing down the rivers comes from the growing economies. So from that perspective, we're actually in a position where they don't have recycling systems, where we need to be able to get them to be able to take that packaging and have a value chain that actually makes it valuable for them to actually go out and collect it. And I don't mean, orphans going across a rubbish tip trying to collect bits of material. I'm talking about a real value chain where it will actually pay people to go and collect it, manufacture it into something that can be used within the local community or within that particular area. And I think that is a big responsibility that we have from a packaging perspective in terms of identifying exactly what type of packaging and how that can be used.
I think that is so important. And if you do get time to look at a charity called Waste Aid, well worth looking it up. Tony, did that answer your question? All right, but you can always buttonhole them over a drink later. I've got to keep reminding you about that.
It's Martha from Fab Little Bag. It was just really more on that question. Wouldn't it just be easier to have a color-coded system, because that's internationally understood by everybody, and then you could match that up with the local authority dustbins? So, if it's got a red mark on it, it goes into the red bin, etc. If you're going to keep it simple, you really have to be really simple.
So you're
I'm
looking for a
looking at
global
Jane, actually.
system.
A global system, because then wherever you are, you're all doing the same thing.
I'm actually looking at Jane from the OPRL. Would you like to answer that, Jane? Thank you.
Feast here. Right.
So just muscling on to the
I've
panel
lost
here.
control.
So the part of the problem is not only do local authorities collect different things, they use different colour bins. So it's not just as easy as matching up. Our consumer insight work shows that using the Recycle Now swoosh against the green background gets huge recognition, actually, and people are very reassured by that. And the black one that's got the line through, people pretty much understand that. And as people have already said, it's the one in the middle that's confusing. We are looking at how we could move away from that, so it is a clear binary system. And certainly one of the most interesting things, I think, is that young people, so 25 to 34-year-olds, have an 80% recognition. 18 to 24-year-olds have a 90% recognition, and that, I think, is largely because our great members like Jane put the label next to the microwave instructions so they all see it. So we're getting there, but it's what would seem to be a sensible response, actually, in the backdrop of the world we're operating in, doesn't quite work.
Yeah. Just in case you didn't realise, Jane runs the on-pack recycling label system. So, because I know you didn't get a proper introduction before, and you're going to see more of Jane tomorrow when you are going to come back. Jim, I mean, you are, well, both of you, and Paul, global companies, multinational. Have you looked at a sort of global recycling information route?
We're actually in the process of trying to adopt a system that works globally, and we're experiencing exactly the same problem. We've looked at color coding. How does that work across all of the countries? Or when in our own country, one authority to another has a completely different system, and it really is hard for us to get something that's standardized. But we support the fact that there is a system available, and that we should actually use that going forward on all of our packaging.
Yeah, and I think the framework of OPRL is being looked at by regulators in other markets around the world, and more multi-market brands are using it. I mean, the challenge we have isn't even a global one, it's a European one. So in some markets, for instance, Norway or Germany, we'll be in a DRS type system. In France and the GB, we're not. Even between GB and France, it's a very different kind of recovery system. In France, we have to put an obligatory symbol to show we've paid into the compliance scheme. Here we don't. So even at a European level, it is messy, I'm afraid, which doesn't help in this confusion that I think all of us encounter. Even as experts, I think most of us get a bit confused. Yeah, for those that didn't hear, the question was that all the symbols and signs are different in every market and country, which I think we would agree with. But don't forget, a lot of us in the food industry have already got colour-coded symbols on our packs, and that's really around the nutrient content. So you'll end up with lots of colours if you're not careful.
But that doesn't take away the good sense of what you're saying. I mean, the logic is is perfect. I believe we have a gentleman at the back who now has a microphone.
Hi, my name's Michael Pritchard from Anyway Spray. I was a speaker earlier on. My question is recycling versus reuse. And Coca-Cola would probably have a very good insight into this because, you know, when I was young, I used to get my milk delivered on the doorstep and you'd hand the glass bottle back and they'd reuse it. While recycling is very good, there's a cost to the recycling of melting it down and regrinding it and reusing it again versus picking up the glass bottle, say, and reusing that in your facilities. Have you got a view, because there is an overall cost of recycling versus reuse, the cost to the environment, et cetera, et cetera. I hope you can distill the question from. Yeah,
this is not just a financial cost, this is...
Yeah, no, I think it's a really great question. We work in lots of markets where refillables and reusables are still a really important part of our packaging mix and will remain so. Here in the UK, it was... Gosh, I mean, I remember the first job I did in journalism was on Packaging News, the much missed Packaging News magazine, as news editor. And these debates were really live because in parts of Europe, there was a very strong debate around moves away from refillable packaging that here in the UK we'd had sort of 10 or 15 years before that, when retailers and increasingly the hospitality sector wanted to move away and change their whole network and framework. So we ended up with edge-of-town supermarkets that didn't have the facility for consumers to bring back the pack, and so our whole kind of culture of using the containers changed. So here in the UK, we're always going to have that, I think, first initial hurdle we'll have to get over as a trade before we can really get into answering the question about do we move back to refillable or not. But I'll come back to a trial we've been doing in Reading just to finish the answer to your question. In other markets, if you go into our plants, what you will see is you'll walk into a room which is probably as big, if not bigger, than this hall, and it will have essentially an enormous big washing machine in it, which will then have to pump caustic soda into the bottles, then pump that out, then clean them at high temperatures, then check the bottles to check there's no contaminants still in them or cracks, and then put them on a line when we're absolutely certain they're safe to go back to the market. So the costs are there as well in terms of carbon and water use and the energy it requires to clean the bottles to go back. So in all of these answers, I think the challenge the industry as a whole faces is there are no yes, no binary answers. You've always got to make really a value judgment. Are you concerned about food waste? That might drive one choice. Are you concerned about the carbon impact of the packs you put on the market and your overall business footprint? Do you worry about water usage? There are lots of drivers as to why you'd make a pack choice, and all of them are rational, and all of them fit probably an environmental as well as a business concern. So it's probably not a very clear answer to your question, but it's one that we have all the time in our business. And some of you will be aware we've also been looking at new technologies, new ideas to engage consumers. So we're just finishing a trial at Reading University where we use a dispensing equipment technology we call Freestyle, and have chip cups and reusable cups that people can go, they pay a certain price and they can go back and refill the cup. So we're still trying to evaluate that trial to see if that offers any ideas about future packaging formats that we want to use.
Anybody else who's experienced reusables, Jay? I mean, reusable carry bags.
Well, all I was going to say is that everything that we put on the market, and it's not just Sainsbury's, all of us that we put on the market has been very well considered and thought through. I'm not saying that we've not got a lot more to do. We absolutely have, but everything that we do has been thought through so that we are doing the best for the market, for the customer, for that particular product, and in the way that society changes. So in the terms of milk bottles, those milk bottles are recyclable. And every single, I think I can say this, every single local council will collect milk bottles and they can be recycled and they get made into more milk bottles. So that's already a really good closed loop system. And actually, I'm going to bang on about the UK plastic pack because it is a very, very good commitment, which is why we've signed to it and all of the retailers have signed up to it, is because we need to create that closed loop system for as many bits of packaging as possible, particularly when it comes to plastic. You can still have milk delivered if you want to in a milk bottle. Obviously, it's glass, and therefore if you smash it, you've lost all your product, and plastic does bounce. So there was definitely some benefits to moving out of glass and into plastic. But just if there were simple options for some of these challenges, we would have done them already.
Paul, do you want to?
Yeah, I think from a manufacturing point of view, we're the investment that we've made for our automatic lines within Folkestone is over $50 million. For us to then relook at the way in which that whole manufacturing changes is a massive investment for a company the size of Church and Dwight. It would change. It's a ballpark changer in terms of looking at taking packaging back and then re-cleaning it and actually recycling it. I think from our perspective that would be a no-go. But I read in the paper that Bulldog, for instance, have just launched a 25-litre container for you to refill your shower products. But how many people want to keep 25 litres on the side of their bath to be able to top up their shower pack. There are real implications in terms of the practicality of being able to manufacture product that can be shipped around. So, volume packs versus refillable is, everybody is trying to look at it, and I don't think anyone has found a real solution yet.
Just picking up on Jane, how many people in the room are aware of the Plastics Pact? And there's no shame for not knowing. What would you say that would be, half? Or there are some who don't. Right, which is interesting, actually, suggesting still quite a lot of work to be done there. Hope that answers your question or helps, Michael. Anyway, anybody in this row here? We haven't had anybody. Oh, we have on this side. Excellent, thank you.
This is Imran. I'm from Bourne Packaging from Ireland. Yeah, from Bourne Packaging Bourne Packaging from Ireland. I just wanted to ask Sainsbury Jane a question. Where we are on biodegradable and compostable materials for packaging.
Okay, it's a very, very good question. Are there any waste management companies in the audience? Hopefully I'm going to help you out
There's
here.
nothing to be ashamed of if you are.
No, it's
Right.
good, it's good. At the moment, if we put compostable packaging in with recyclable packaging, it is going to cause them a huge amount of problems.
Yes.
So putting compostable packaging directly onto the market at the moment is going to be a bit of a challenge. It doesn't mean it's not part of the future, but again, this is why part of the UK Plastics Pact, it sounds like I'm a big advertiser for the Plastic Pact, doesn't it? One of the commitments, one of the targets is to that all plastic packaging is 100% reusable, recyclable or compostable. So the industry will be working on making compostable. And in terms of biodegradable, again, we don't know what the unintended consequences are at the moment because nothing that I have seen, although there may be some stuff coming to the market, is fully degradable. So actually you end up with microplastics, which are far worse for the environment and for marine life. And we don't want to have an unintended consequence. So there is work to be done in those areas, from my opinion.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, go,
Yeah.
Go for
Most
it.
definitely,
Go.
most definitely. I think from a manufacturing point of view, bioplastics, etc., have implications in terms of their reactivity with the types of materials, formulas that we have. They also have a situation where their moulding and manufacturing are perhaps not to the tolerances that we need to be running at 300 a minute down a production line. So there's still we're looking at it, but there's still a lot of work to be done to make that a really viable way of going forward with plastics within our particular industry anyway.
And you've experimented, have you? Or
We have indeed.
you haven't experimented. Julian.
I'd just echo what people have said. I think a lot more work probably for the industry to do on compostability, but particularly biodegradability. And particularly when I think of some of the debates around beverage packaging at the moment, I do get quite anxious at some of the claims I see of, I saw one, I can't remember who it was, with a bottle that would dissolve into seawater, which sounded fantastic, except I think the seawater had to be at a constant temperature of 27 degrees or something.
Oh, for heaven's
So there's always these caveats, always these little design constraints, always these little unknowns around the technology. That is not to say we shouldn't, whether it's through the Plastics Pact or through other fora, be looking at the technologies that are emerging, looking at new ideas, constantly rethinking our approach to packaging. But at the moment, for me, the jury's still probably out on that.
Thank you. And God, I don't know how it's meant to get, should never even get to the sea in the other way, just to prove that. I think as an industry, we should pull together and ban the term biodegradable. I think this is absolutely overdue. You know, you listen to Keep Britain Tidy, and I don't always, but in this instance, they say this is an open invitation for littering. I can throw my banana peel, my apple, therefore I can throw this packaging on the ground. It's got to go, I'm afraid. Now, what about another question, please? Where do we have someone else here? Did someone shout? Here, the sort of in the front. Oh, sorry, was there a question that wanted over here?
Hi, I'm from Yardley,
Okay.
Geeta. So we are looking at using bioplastics for some of our premium products. We're just about to launch, actually. We just presented to Sainsbury's, and we'll probably be doing a one-off with you guys. So there's a lot of interest, but obviously it contaminates the whole stream, like you guys mentioned. So what does one do? Does one do something which, which the Bulldogs have done, and said this is all plant plastic and do it, or and then appeal to the consumers, or not do it because it contaminates the stream?
I think that's a fair question. I mean, would you describe yourself as being confused? And yeah, fine.
Thank you to my lovely colleagues here who've just handed me do the right thing. And the right thing would be to understand the Plastic Pact and why it's been put together. At the moment, I don't anything that's biodegradable or compostable is the right thing to put on the market. As a brand, we are not looking at plant-based or bio-based plastics at the moment, simply because it feels wrong to use crops to make packaging rather than possibly feed starving nations. And we have starving people in this country. So there are always lots of sides to an argument. So I can't really answer for your brand, but it's a...
Not always. We'll leave that separate
I
bit
think
of
that's
debate.
yes.
But we can
We'll have
talk
a chat afterwards, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, there's still a lot of work to be done, and I think unless there is a positive recycling stream for bioplastics, then I can't see that really lifting off, because if you've got something that works, why change it? If you've got something that is recycling, from a PET perspective, by a polypropylene perspective, that you can recycle, don't change it because it's working, and let's improve it and make it better, rather than try and add something to it which confuses them. I took my whole team to a very small waste disposal company, waste management company in Kent, and it was an eye-opener for sort of the way in which these guys handle and manage this material, baling it. I mean, the guy was like a stockbroker. He was looking at the price of plastics on a daily basis to see which one he could push out at the best price that he had actually collected all of this material. If you ever get a chance to go and see any of these guys, do, because it's an eye-opener as to how sort of commercial and sort of astute they are in terms of handling this type of material. It's amazing. So they have my thumbs up every time, because I think from a packaging perspective, they are the people that are actually driving things back into the recycling stream, and they deserve the credit and sort of putting up on a pedestal, really.
And Jim, when you answer, I want to be grateful. Something which keeps me awake at night. Well, not quite, but is there going to be enough rPET available to satisfy your demand and your competitors, who are obviously, I imagine, going to match you?
Based on all the claims that everybody's making at the moment here in GB, no. It's going to get very, very tight as a market.
Right.
But I think that's a good thing. I mean, we helped set up a PET bottle recycling plant in Lincolnshire in 2011. I think it's in the public domain. That facility had troubles, shall we say, a number of times, and we maintained our support, buying 25% of our PET as rPET from that plant from 2012 until it was bought again 2017 by a new company, Plastic Pact, which I think many people in the food industry will know is a big supplier of food-grade PET. So we're very confident that that business really understands the market, really understands recycling, really understands what retailers and manufacturers want. So we're very proud of the fact we've been consistent, we've stayed, and there is a very, very good mechanical recycling facility here in Great Britain. Hopefully with the reforms that are coming, we will see more facilities coming on stream, more capacity being built as people have more confidence that this is the right thing to do. And I also get asked the question all the time, yes, there is an on-cost. So as a business, you have to make a decision whether you think this is in the best interest for your business, your brand, your consumers for the long term. We took that decision in 2011.
Yeah, thank you for answering that. You know, when you're in a restaurant and it's late and you're the last people in there and they're laying out the breakfast table, I think we're reaching the equivalent of that. However, can we have one more or not? One more question. Do we have one more question from this excellent audience? Here we go. Name, rank, and whatever.
Hi, I'm Heather West from Kettle Foods. You've spoken, Jane, about the Plastics Pact and WRAP, and that's something that we've tried to get involved in as a company. However, we have struggled to engage with them a bit, and maybe that's because we're not big enough as a company. So I didn't know if you had any advice for us on how you perhaps get the Plastics Pact to work with us, and just to give us some advice as a company.
Why don't you come in and see me and my team, and then we can help you.
Yeah.
On our products, obviously, yeah. But yeah, I think they've got quite a lot of members at the moment, and I'm sure at some point in the future they might be taking on some more, but why don't you come and talk to us specifically?
Yeah, that'd be brilliant. Thank you.
No problem.
And WRAP really shouldn't sit back on that.
Day one of Packaging Innovations, luxury packaging, and ADF London is now closed.
Did you see my lips move? Oh, for God's sake.
We look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Please make your way to the exit and have a safe journey home.
Right, don't make your way to the exit. Make yourself away. Get to the networking bar. There's a glass of something for you to drink there, and we can carry on the conversation. Just want to thank the three panelists who are involved now. Please, come on. Obviously, we want to thank again Lord Deben. We want to thank Phil Chadwick. We want, most importantly, to thank yourselves for coming along. Come back tomorrow. There are 2 excellent sessions going on. Look forward to seeing you then. Have a good evening.